If you've ever wondered what happens when the deadliest predator in the galaxy ends up sleeping in a human's bed, then you're in for a story the Empire still whispers about in fear. This isn't some bedtime tale or spaceport rumor. It happened. And if you're new here, make sure you hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because this one is going to stick in your head for days. Smoke clung to the horizon like bruised fingers, curling and clawing at the pale sky. Elias Cade's boots crunched over the scorched rubble of what had been a farming settlement 2 days ago. Now it was nothing but heat, ash, and silence so heavy it felt like gravity had thickened. His breath hissed in the filter of his rebreather as he stepped over the twisted frame of a door. The air stank of burnt wood, melted plasteel, and something metallic underneath, blood, but old enough that the flies had already claimed it. The raid had been fast, the kind that left no bodies for burial because there was nothing left to bury. The locals called them Kshari sweeps. The Empire called them containment actions. Elias called them murder. He'd seen enough in his soldiering days to know the difference. His scanner pinged. A faint life sign, low on the thermal scale, tucked behind a half-collapsed grain silo. He slowed, every nerve tightening. There shouldn't be survivors. Kshari didn't leave survivors. The sound reached him before the sight, a rasping, broken growl, like metal dragged over stone. Elias stepped carefully, rifle at the ready, and the rubble parted to reveal a flash of deep black fur streaked with ash. It was small, barely the length of his arm, its forelimbs trembling as it tried to rise. The face stopped him cold, slanted golden eyes, vertical pupils, and a mouth lined with razored teeth even in youth. A Kshari cub. Elias had fought their kind before, adult warriors, each a nightmare of speed, claws, and cunning. The Empire classified them as Tier 1 killers, not to be domesticated, not to be captured. Law 88-3 was simple: if you found one alive you killed it on the spot. No exceptions. He could almost hear the voice of his old commanding officer in his head. Shoot it before it learns your scent. The cub bared its teeth, a low hiss bubbling from its chest. It wasn't old enough to speak, but it was old enough to hate. He saw the wounds, laser burns along its side, a shattered leg twisted at the wrong angle. Even injured, it was dangerous. And it would grow into something far worse. He should walk away. Or pull the trigger. Or both. Instead he crouched. The cub's breath hitched. Its claws scraped the ground weakly, but it didn't lunge. Its eyes stayed locked on his. Elias reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out the corner of a thermal blanket. The cub's nostrils flared, catching the scent of clean fabric and human skin. Something in that look, equal parts defiance and desperate will, struck him in the ribs like a punch. He remembered another face, much smaller, pale and freckled. His younger brother, Matty. Gone now, lost in the siege of Castron. Elias hadn't been there to protect him. This was different. No, it was the same. And he wasn't going to fail again. "You're gonna hate me for this, kid," he muttered. He wrapped the cub in the blanket, ignoring the weak thrash of its claws. It snarled into the fabric, but its body was trembling too hard to fight. He cradled it against his chest and turned back toward the skeletal outline of his hauler parked beyond the smoking fields. Halfway there his comm crackled. "Attention all salvage crews, this is Sector Militia Command," a clipped voice barked. "Mandatory scans in progress. Be advised, any non-human biosigns aboard your vessel will be confiscated and processed under Imperial law." Processed? He knew what that meant. The cub would be dead before the hour was out. The hauler's ramp groaned under his boots. He crossed to the hidden smuggling compartment under the deck plates, pried it open and eased the cub inside. It gave one last guttural hiss before curling into the corner. He closed the hatch just as a shadow passed over the cockpit windows. A militia patrol skimmer hovered outside, blue lights casting harsh streaks through the glass. 2 armored officers stepped aboard without waiting for an invitation. The lead one, a broad-shouldered woman with an old burn scar across her chin, swept her scanner lazily across the cabin. "What's your cargo?" she asked. "Salvage from the outer settlement," Elias said, leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the galaxy. She glanced at the readout on her wrist pad, then at him. "Your heat signature's running high in the aft section." "Old engines," he lied. "They run hot." Her gaze lingered a moment too long, then she snorted. "You're clear. Get off this rock before the Kshari come back." They left without another word. Elias stayed still until the patrol skimmer dwindled to a speck against the sky. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. He slid open the compartment. 2 golden eyes stared up at him from the shadows. The cub's breathing was steadier now, its fur still singed but its posture less rigid. It didn't snarl this time. Elias closed the hatch again and went to prep for departure. By the time they broke Atmo, night was rolling over the planet's curve. The stars blinked awake one by one, cold and steady in the void. Elias keyed in a course for a backwater repair dock a few systems away. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere far from the Empire's reach. He didn't think about what he'd done. He didn't think about the bounty they'd put on his head if anyone found out. He just sat in the pilot's chair, listening to the hum of the drives and the faint, almost inaudible sound of something small shifting in the dark below. Hours later he came down to check on it. The cub had dragged the thermal blanket into a nest and was lying with its head resting on its forepaws. Its eyes tracked him as he approached. He crouched, slow enough not to startle it. "You've got two options," he said quietly. "You can stay here, heal up, and then try to eat me. Or," his mouth curved in a humorless smile, "you can stick with me and maybe we figure out a way to keep you alive." The cub blinked. Its ears twitched. Then, with deliberate care, it lowered its head to the blanket and closed its eyes. He took that as an answer. The hum of the ship became a lullaby as he climbed back up to the cockpit. The stars stretched into streaks as the jump drive engaged, and the war-torn colony vanished behind them. Elias knew this wasn't over. There would be questions. There would be danger. The galaxy didn't forget the kind of rules he'd just broken, and the Empire didn't forgive them. But for tonight he'd made his choice. Down in the hidden compartment, the deadliest predator species in known space slept, wrapped in a human's blanket, aboard a human ship. And somewhere deep inside, Elias felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself in years. 10 years from now the Empire would still whisper about what he'd just done. But for now all that mattered was the quiet between the stars. 10 years changes everything and nothing. The cub Elias had smuggled off a burning world had grown into something that barely fit through the ship's narrow corridors. Rake stood over 7 feet on digitigrade legs, his shoulders broad enough to make the cabin doors hiss in protest when he passed through. The sleek black fur that once hid him in shadows now shimmered faintly under artificial light, and the gold of his eyes had deepened into molten amber. Predators aged into their menace. Rake had aged into legend, if only by proximity to the man who refused to let him go. The vagabond's mercy had been patched, repatched, and nearly blown apart twice in the last decade. Life as an independent hauler wasn't glamorous, but it kept them moving. Staying still too long was dangerous. Elias knew the whispers never really stopped. Dockworkers would watch Rake walk past with a mixture of awe and disgust, the same expression you'd give a loaded gun left on a bar table. Sometimes Elias caught the murmured bets. How long until the predator turned on him? How many humans would die when it happened? 10 years without a single violent outburst did nothing to erase a law older than most empires. Predators were predators. The cargo bay smelled faintly of machine oil and ozone. Elias was sealing the last crate when heavy footfalls padded up behind him. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You're packing wrong," Rake said, his voice carrying that deep, rolling cadence of his people. 10 years had sanded the raw hiss from his speech, but the accent still clung to every word. "I'm packing fine," Elias replied, securing the final seal. "You're just picky." Rake crouched, inspecting the stack of crates. "The inertia dampers don't work as well on the starboard side. These will shift." "You volunteering to repack?" Elias asked. A low, almost human-sounding grunt. "No." They left the bay together, Elias heading for the cockpit while Rake's long stride fell into step beside him. Most days they moved like this without thinking. A rhythm built over years in tight quarters, surviving bad deals, worse weather, and the occasional trigger-happy patrol. Elias had long stopped thinking of Rake as cargo. Somewhere in the middle of those 10 years, he'd stopped thinking of him as rescued, too. Now Rake was simply Rake. The ship didn't feel right without the weight of him in it. The docking clamps disengaged with a hollow thud, and the Mercy drifted free from the orbiting station above Draven's reach. The plan was a short hop to the next system, a delivery of processed and, if they were lucky, payment in actual credits instead of barter goods. Elias keyed in the course. On the comm screen, a bored dockmaster appeared, his eyes flicking over the flight manifest. They lingered when Rake stepped into view behind Elias. "You've got a Kshari on board," the dockmaster said flatly. Elias kept his tone neutral. "I've got my crew on board." "That crew member's a walking violation. You know what your kind of stunt gets people thinking." "I'm not interested in their thoughts," Elias said, fingers still moving over the navigation panel. The man leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "It gets people thinking the laws don't mean anything. That maybe the predators were right about humans not having the spine to defend themselves. Elias didn't look up. "We done here?" The dockmaster's lip curled, but he cut the transmission without another word. The comm window blinked out. Elias exhaled through his nose. Behind him, Rake was still staring at the empty screen. "He's not wrong about the spine thing," Rake murmured. Elias glanced back. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means most humans would have killed me," Rake said, his gaze sliding toward the stars. "They wouldn't have taken the risk." "Most humans don't get a say in who I let on my ship," Elias replied. For a moment Rake said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he moved toward his quarters, or rather, the quarters that were supposed to be his. Elias already knew where he'd end up. Sure enough, by the time the Mercy had slipped into the darkness between systems, Rake had returned with a blanket and a data pad, stretching himself out across Elias's bunk like a house cat that weighed 200 kilos. Elias leaned in the doorway. "You've got your own room." "This one smells better," Rake said without looking up. "It smells like me." "Exactly." There was no arguing with that kind of logic, so Elias didn't bother. He went back to the cockpit, letting the hum of the drives and the faint rattle of unsecured tools fill the quiet. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close enough. They hit the next station 2 days later, a rusting hub of trade and trouble called Marrow Point. The docking bay was dim and smelled faintly of hot metal and old grease. Elias hated stations like this. They were full of people who'd sell your shadow if they could catch it. They weren't 3 steps down the ramp before trouble found them. A tall, narrow man in a threadbare coat stepped into their path, his eyes skipping right over Elias to fix on Rake. "That's a fine piece you've got there," the man said with an oily smile. "Not often you see one of them on a leash." Rake's ears flattened against his skull. "I'm not on a leash." The man's smile widened. "You're walking beside a human. That's leash enough." Elias stepped forward, close enough that the man had to lean back to keep his balance. "You've got exactly 3 seconds to move." The man raised his hands in mock surrender, backing away. Wasn't starting anything. Just talking. Rake's claws flexed once, the faint rasp of them against the metal deck loud in the air. Elias caught the movement out of the corner of his eye. If Rake lashed out, there'd be no end to the trouble they'd be in. He said nothing, just held Rake's gaze until the predator's shoulders eased. They made the delivery, got paid in half-usable currency, and were almost back to the Mercy when Elias heard it. The murmur of voices, just far enough away to be out of casual earshot but close enough to catch words. "That's the one. The human with the predator. Says he's tamed it. 10 years no kill. Bet he's next." Elias kept walking, but the weight of the words followed him up the ramp. Inside the Mercy he found Rake in the galley, tearing into a ration pack like it had personally insulted him. Elias dropped the payment chit on the table. "Words getting around again," Elias said. Rake's chewing slowed. "What kind of word?" "The kind that makes people curious. And dangerous." Rake swallowed, his jaw tightening. "You think I don't know what they say about me? I think you don't care until it's too late." The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable kind. Rake set the empty wrapper down with deliberate care. "If they come for me, Elias, will you stop them?" Elias met his gaze without flinching. "I won't stop them." Rake's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something almost like hurt crossing his features. "I'll kill them," Elias finished. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Rake huffed out something that might have been a laugh, sharp and humorless. "You're going to get yourself killed one day." "Probably," Elias said, turning toward the cockpit. "But not today." They lifted off from Marrow Point without incident, but Elias knew the feeling in his gut. He'd felt it before battles, before ambushes. The kind of pressure that meant something was coming. The galaxy had a long memory for broken rules, and 10 years was a long time to tempt fate. Out in the dark between stars, Rake stood by the viewport, watching the endless void like it might answer a question he hadn't asked. His reflection in the glass was all angles and shadow, a silhouette the galaxy feared. Beside him, Elias's own reflection was smaller, human, fragile by comparison. The predator broke the silence first. "If they make you choose, Elias, between me and your kind, what will you do?" Elias didn't look away from the stars. Burn the question before it's asked. Somewhere deep in the black, something unseen shifted. The Mercy sensors didn't pick it up, but Elias's instincts did. Whatever was coming, the whispers were about to grow louder. And this time they might carry a name. The first sign of trouble was the shadow. It fell over the cockpit, blotting out the stars, too steady to be an asteroid and too silent to be a traitor. Elias's hands stilled over the controls. Above them, in the black, an Imperial dreadnought was sliding into view, its hull lights cutting cold lines across the void. No one drifted up on a ship that size by accident. The comm lit up, the signal override punching through without request. Unidentified vessel Vagabond's Mercy, power down drives and prepare for boarding. This is Admiral Varos of the Imperial Navy. Elias didn't bother to hide the curse under his breath. Rake was already at his shoulder, broad frame blocking half the light from the displays. "They're here for me," Rake said. Elias glanced at him. "You don't know that." "Yes," Rake replied, voice like stone grinding on stone. "I do." The dreadnought's docking clamps connected with a dull, final-sounding clang. Elias stood, his mind moving too fast to settle on anything but the next step. Varos wasn't a name you heard often outside of military channels, but when you did, it came with a trail of ruined fleets and whispered threats. If he was here, this wasn't a routine scan. The airlock cycled. 3 Marines stepped in first, rifles up but not aimed. Behind them came Varos, tall, with the kind of presence that made the space around him feel smaller. His uniform was immaculate, his eyes cold and assessing. They skipped past Elias and locked on Rake. "So it's true," Varos said. "The human and his pet." Rake's claws flexed, but he didn't move. Elias stepped between them. "State your business." Varos smiled faintly, the way someone smiles at a child who doesn't understand the rules. "That creature is Rake Voss, last surviving heir of Captain Thrain Voss. Your ward is the rightful leader of the Kshari Predator clans. The Empire has a vested interest in ensuring such a figure is properly contained." "Contained?" Elias repeated, his voice flat. "A polite word," Varos said. "We both know what happens if a symbol like him walks free. Civil unrest. Rebellion. Blood in the streets." Elias kept his face still. "He's not your symbol. He's not your problem." Varos's gaze sharpened. "He's every problem." Rake's voice cut through the tension. "If I go with you, you kill me." Quietly. "Efficiently." "Not necessarily," Varos said. "We have programs. Rehabilitation is possible, even for your kind." Rake's eyes narrowed. "A cage with cleaner walls is still a cage." Elias could feel the air between them tightening, like the moments before a firefight. He didn't know what he'd expected after 10 years of keeping Rake hidden, but he'd hoped it wouldn't be this, cornered, outgunned, staring down a man who saw people as pieces on a board. "You have until the count of 3, Varos said quietly, "to hand him over." "Or what?" Elias asked. "Or I take him." Elias didn't wait for the count. His hand hit the emergency panel on the console, and the Mercy's modified thrusters roared to life. The Marines staggered as the ship lurched. Elias slammed the hatch controls, locking the airlock. Varos's voice followed them, calm and infuriating. "You can run, Kate. But you won't run far." The Mercy peeled away from the dreadnought, the inertial dampers whining under the strain. The comm flooded with hails and warnings, all ignored. Rake braced himself against the bulkhead, eyes bright with something Elias hadn't seen in years, a mix of fear and memory. "They'll hunt us," Rake said. "They've been hunting you your whole life," Elias replied, eyes fixed on the NAV readout. "Difference is now they've told me why." They ducked into a narrow debris field, the remnants of an old mining operation. Elias wove the Mercy through the shattered rock while the dreadnought's signal faded behind them. It wouldn't last. Varos would track them again. When they finally broke free into open space, Rake was silent. Elias glanced over. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Rake's gaze was distant. "My father wasn't just a warlord. He was trying to unite the clans. Not for conquest, at least not just for that. The Empire had been choking our worlds for decades. He wanted us strong enough to break their hold." "And you?" Elias asked. "I was supposed to be his successor. They hit our home before I was ready. I remember fire. The smell of blood. My father falling." His jaw tightened. "I remember someone carrying me. I thought it was one of ours. Now I think it was you." Elias shook his head. "I found you in the ruins. No one else was there." "Then the rest was a dream," Rake said. "Or a lie my mind told me." Silence filled the cabin, heavy with the weight of what had just been revealed. Elias thought of the boy he'd carried from that field of ash, the gamble he'd made in keeping him alive. If Varos was right, Rake wasn't just dangerous because of what he was dangerous because of what he represented. "You realize what this means?" Elias said. "If your people find out you're alive, they'll expect me to lead them," Rake finished. And the Empire will do whatever it takes to stop that. The comm pinged again, this time with a weaker, untraceable signal. A voice came through, crisp, female, urgent. Mercy, this is Arden Station. We've picked up an encrypted Imperial broadcast. Varos has placed a bounty on your ship and crew. Anyone who brings you in, dead or alive, gets full pardon on past charges. Elias killed the channel without answering. He didn't need to tell Rake what that meant. Every pirate, smuggler and half-desperate trader in range would be gunning for them by sunrise. He keyed in a new course, far from the usual lanes. We go dark for a while. No comms, no ports. Rake leaned back in his seat. That won't stop Varos. No, Elias said. But it might give us time to think. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched and twisted as the Mercy slipped into jump space. Elias's mind was already moving through contingencies, places they could hide, people who might help. None of it felt like enough. Rake broke the silence. When I was young, before the raid, my father told me something. He said the strongest weapon isn't claws or teeth. It's someone who will stand beside you even when every law says they shouldn't. Elias's hands tightened on the controls. Guess I'm that someone? Rake's answering smile was small and sharp. For now. The jump tunnel around them shimmered, the ship's sensors picking up faint ripples in the distortion. Elias frowned. We've got company. Another ship was shadowing them in the slipstream, closing fast. Elias didn't know if it was bounty hunters or Imperial pursuit, but he knew one thing for certain. They weren't done running. The Mercy's engines growled as Elias pushed them harder, the hull vibrating under the strain. Rake rose from his seat, claws unsheathed, eyes fixed on the growing blur of their pursuer. Whatever was back there, it wasn't going to stop. And neither were they. The pursuing vessel broke from the slipstream less than 1,000 clicks behind them, its profile angular and predatory. Elias recognized the silhouette immediately, not bounty hunters, not smugglers. Imperial interceptor built for speed and surgical strikes. Varos had sent more than a threat. He had sent the knife meant to finish the job. Rake stood at the viewport, the amber of his eyes glinting in the dim light. They won't give up. They don't have to, Elias said, flicking through evasive patterns. They only have to catch us once. The first barrage lit up the void, white-hot streaks flashing past the hull. Shields groaned under the impact. Elias's hands danced over the controls, rolling the Mercy through a corkscrew of engine bursts that scraped them just clear of the next volley. Rake leaned over the console. We can't outrun them forever. Don't plan to, Elias said. We're going somewhere they won't follow. Rake's gaze sharpened. Where? Deadlight Belt. The Predator's ears twitched in surprise. That's a graveyard. That's the point. The Deadlight Belt was a drift of shattered asteroid cities, long abandoned after a mining war turned the region into a labyrinth of broken stone and forgotten weapons. Navigating it was a death wish, but death was already behind them. They punched through the first line of tumbling rock, the Mercy's hull scraping dangerously close to jagged fragments. The interceptor followed, its heavier frame forcing it to slow. Elias pushed the advantage, threading the Mercy into narrower gaps, trusting his memory of the old war maps. This isn't buying us much time, Rake said, bracing against the swaying deck. It's buying enough, Elias replied. Help me set the charges. They moved in unison, Rake pulling crates from the hold, Elias arming the old proximity mines he'd salvaged years ago and never had reason to use. Together they planted them along a twisting path, their hands quick despite the violent lurches of the ship. The interceptor closed in again, its engines flaring bright in the darkness. Elias throttled down just enough to lure it closer. Then he hit the trigger. The mines ignited in a chain of silent blossoms, each explosion lighting the rocks in strobing flashes. Shards of asteroids spun through the void, tearing into the interceptor's shields. The pursuing vessel staggered, its nose shearing against a drifting chunk of hull plating from some forgotten warship. It didn't destroy them, but it slowed them. The reprieve was brief. The comm crackled and Varos's voice came through, cold as ever. You can't win, Kate. You can't protect him forever. Elias didn't bother to respond. Rake did. You think this is about protection, Rake said into the comm. It's not. It's about choice. And I've made mine. There was no reply. The interceptor surged forward again. They burst from the belt's far side into the shadow of an abandoned fortress station, its massive structure half collapsed but still clinging to the remains of an energy grid. Elias guided the Mercy into the station's skeletal docking bay, powering down everything but life support. Now we make our stand, Elias said. Rake tilted his head. You're ready to die here. I'm ready for them to wish they'd never followed us. They split without discussion, Rake moving to the upper catwalks with a scavenged plasma rifle, Elias staying near the ship to work the station's failing defense systems. Each knew the other's rhythm, each trusted without needing to say it. The interceptor's landing struts clanged onto the deck minutes later. Imperial Marines fanned out in perfect formation, armor gleaming in the fortress's weak light. Varos emerged last, his gaze sweeping the bay like a predator surveying the kill zone. "I'll make you one last offer," Varos called. "Step aside, Kate. You have no stake in this." Elias stepped forward from the shadows, rifle leveled. "You don't get to decide what I have a stake in." The first shot came from above, Rake's rifle spitting blue fire, dropping 2 Marines before they could turn. Chaos bloomed. Elias's rifle barked, forcing the rest into cover. Varos moved with unnerving calm, his return fire precise. The fight was brutal and close. Marines pushed forward in disciplined bursts, only to be met by Rake's swift, lethal strikes from above and Elias's stubborn refusal to yield ground. A grenade blast sent Elias sprawling, his side burning. He forced himself up, the world ringing, and saw Varos advancing through the smoke. "Move, Cade," Varos said. "He's a weapon. Nothing more." Elias's voice was raw but steady. "Then you should know, humans don't abandon their weapons mid-battle." Varos's shot came fast. Rake came faster. He dropped from the catwalk like a shadow falling, slamming into Varos with the force of a collapsing wall. The Admiral went down hard, Rake's claws at his throat. For a heartbeat, Elias thought he would finish it, thought the predator he'd raised would prove every fear right. Instead, Rake pulled back. Varos's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because I am not what you say I am," Rake said. "And because he taught me better." The surviving Marines hesitated, their commander alive but at the mercy of the one they'd been taught to kill on sight. Elias stepped forward, his weapon still ready. "Take your Admiral and go," Elias said. "And tell the Empire this, if you come for us again, we won't be this merciful." They left. Not quickly but without looking back. In the silence that followed, Elias sank against the hull, his wound throbbing. Rake crouched beside him, his massive frame blocking out the harsh station lights. "You're bleeding," Rake said. "Better than the alternative." Rake studied him for a long moment. "You stood in front of me. You stood over me," Elias countered. Something like a smile flickered across Rake's face. "We're going to be hunted until the end." "Then we'd better keep moving," Elias said. They limped back to the Mercy. The engines roared to life, the fortress falling away behind them. Out in the black, the stars waited, cold, endless, unbroken. By the time word spread, the story had already changed. Some said the Predator had spared the Admiral to prove a point. Others said the human had fought an Imperial strike team alone. The truth twisted with each telling, until it was something larger than life. Years from now, in the quiet corners of stations and the smoke-filled bars of free worlds, they would still whisper about the man who raised the Empire's nightmare, and the Predator who chose to be more than his blood. And somewhere, far from the reach of law or legend, in the space between stars, they still slept in the same bed. They say the fortress burned for 3 days. Not in fire, there is no oxygen for that, but in streaks of plasma, fractured reactors venting their last, and the glow of 1,000 drifting hull fragments. Somewhere in that debris field, the Mercy limped away, her patched hull groaning, her engines coughing blue fire. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, hands resting lightly on the controls. Rake, no longer cub, no longer simply Predator, rested on the deck beside him, head low, breathing slow. His fur was streaked with ash and blood, not all of it his own. The comm panel was silent. No pursuit. No Imperial signal. Varos was dead. The Empire would heal as it always did, but something inside it had shifted. Somewhere in the chain of whispered orders and silent protocols, there would be a permanent note. Do not engage Elias Cade. Do not engage the Predator. You're quiet, Elias murmured, not looking down. Rake's golden eyes opened, catching the reflection of the stars. I am thinking. His voice was deeper now, resonant, a far cry from the unsure hisses of his youth. They will hunt us again. Elias smirked faintly. Let them try. They drifted in silence for a long time, the kind of silence only deep space can give, where the hum of engines is the heartbeat, and the stars look close enough to touch. Rake spoke again, slower this time. I understand now why you did it. Why you didn't leave me there on that station. Elias kept his eyes forward. You were alive. That was reason enough. You could have sold me. Left me to your kind's governments. Or worse. I could have, Elias agreed. But then I'd have missed out on having the universe's deadliest bodyguard. Rake let out a sound somewhere between a chuckle and a growl. And you would have missed out on someone to drag you out of trouble every other week. The Mercy sensors pinged, uncharted space ahead. Elias leaned back, letting the ship's autopilot take over. We'll disappear for a while. Find someplace quiet. And when they come? Rake asked. Elias glanced at him finally, the corner of his mouth lifting. Then we remind them why the Empire whispers about us. The Predator's gaze softened, not with weakness but with something deeper, older. When I was small I thought strength meant claws, teeth and speed. I thought it meant killing before being killed. But you, he paused, searching for the right word. You showed me strength is what you carry for someone else. Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Mercy slipped past the last fragments of the fortress field and into unclaimed stars. Somewhere there would be another fight. Somewhere the Empire would tighten its grip again. Somewhere predators would still be hunted for what they were. But for now, a man and the predator he'd raised from a shivering cub simply flew on, out beyond charts, beyond orders, beyond fear. And the whispers followed them. Always the same story told differently in every bar, every spaceport, every hushed war room. There's a man who raised what should have killed him. There's a predator who calls a human his brother. And if you ever see the Mercy in your scope, pray you're not the reason it came.